Shanti. How are you all? Hope you are doing good. Today we are going to see about the solar eclipse that's going to fall on June 21st, 2020. So everybody is eagerly waiting for that eclipse. They want something good to happen due to that eclipse, because the eclipse that happened in the last year on December, that actually led to the rise of coronavirus, and everybody predicted it beforehand. And now many astrologers say that this solar eclipse that's to fall on 21st June, that's going to bring all the things into a better level. So everything is going to gradually decrease. That's what they predict. After this eclipse, coronavirus is going to slowly decrease globally. So everybody says that there's nothing to worry about this eclipse. Even if there is any negative result, it's going to be very minor. So we need not worry about this eclipse. So as we all know, solar eclipse is nothing but the moon getting in between sun and earth, thereby hides the sun either in part or whole. Both solar and lunar eclipse, they are considered auspicious, but they have the temples closed during the eclipse time, especially in southern part of India. And also people, they don't go out of their home because they believe that there is something negative in the atmosphere that may cause serious health hazard. So they recommend nobody comes out, and especially they don't want the pregnant women, the elderly people, the deceased people and the younger ones to stay home till the eclipse is totally finished. People think that there is something scientific about it, but the reality of it is maybe if there is anything scientific, that is purely coincidental, but there is a strong spiritual significance for this event. So people, while staying indoors, they spend the whole eclipse time reciting mantras and singing devotional songs throughout this time. So this obviously means there is something spiritual rather than scientific about this eclipse. People, they don't recommend people to take food or drink during this time, because they believe that the digestive system will be very weak during the eclipse time. But the real beauty of the eclipse time is they even have the temples shut. So there is something illogical, right? So does it mean even God cannot protect him from eclipse? No, but people think it is so, but it is not so. The actual reason is, there is a story where Parvati, she was doing tapasya. She was doing intense tapasya to save the world from destruction. So she was remembering God Shiva. So this eclipse time marks that period when Parvati did intense tapasya towards God Shiva. Why? To stop the world from getting destroyed. Now we are already in lockdown. It's more like the world is getting destroyed. Not so fast, but still it looks so. So people believe that deities, they stay inside the temple and they perform intense tapasya to get more power from God, thereby they can distribute to the whole world. And we are doing the same while staying indoors. So don't you think Those deities represent us because it is just the memory of what we do now. Yes, those deities, they existed 5000 years back. Only deities existed in the world, and the world was then called heaven. And by world I mean India, and by India I mean regions in and around Delhi. Yes, that was heaven. All the rest of the world will be immersed in the sea. And that used to be the case for the first 2500 years while India was heaven. And we were very happy, we were very peaceful, we were very blissful, we were very beautiful. But in spite of that, we didn't have lust, anger, greed, attachment and ego, because these 5 vices, they steal happiness and peacefulness and blissfulness and all the wealth from us. So that happens only after the completion of first 2500 years. So here we start falling prey to these 5 vices. You know why? Because that is when we forgot that we are actually imperishable souls, as we considered while we were in heaven. Instead, we started to consider ourselves to be this perishable body. While we were soul conscious in heaven, we would be very blissful, because that blissfulness that is generated from within, from the soul. We didn't depend on the external source for getting happiness or for getting peacefulness. But here what happens, once we lose the soul consciousness stage, we become body conscious. So we want to derive that same happiness from external source through our senses. That is what we call as sensual pleasures, which means we become slaves to sensual pleasures. So that is when this world, which was heaven for the first 2500 years, it became hell. And slowly we start experiencing pain and sorrow, and it keeps increasing day by day. You know why? Because of the fact that we forget that we are souls. Just because we misconsidered ourselves to be this body, and we became slaves for these 5 vices, we start experiencing unlimited sorrow and pain. That is exactly when we were reminded of God, because it is only during pain one remembers God. While in heaven we didn't remember God, because there is no need for us to remember God, because everything was going all right. But in hell nothing goes all right. That is when we started developing religions, we started creating temples, churches, mosques. Despite that, our sorrow keeps on increasing day by day. So towards the end of Kali Yuga, God himself comes from his supreme abode, which is called Parandam or Parlok, which is golden red colored light world. There God exists as a point of light, and his name is Shiva or Shiv. And this Shiv is called by Christians as the heavenly Godfather, and by Muslims as Allah. Yes, God is one. And we souls, before coming into this planet Earth, we were there without any body. So we were just as souls. So from there we entered heaven. We enjoyed heaven for the first 2500 years, followed by sorrow and pain in the next 2500 years. Towards the completion of hell, God himself comes. He enters an old man's body and starts giving this teaching about us, about him, about this world cycle. God doesn't take birth like we humans do. He doesn't enter the womb of a mother. So he comes directly, he enters directly into an old man's body, and gives this knowledge directly. So that knowledge is available in all Raja Yoga meditation centers across the globe, and his teaching is collectively called Murli. You can Google Murli in your own language. So that is the direct teaching of God Shiv. Once we start listening to Murli, we will experience that eternal blissful state, and we will be slowly getting rid of these 5 vices like lust, anger, greed, attachment and ego. So we will the more we remember God, the more our sins are wiped off from our souls. Yes, our soul is a tiny point of light that exists in between the eyebrows, which is why Indian Hindus has this habit of wearing red dot called bindi over here. So that is where we live. We are souls, not this body. We souls operate this body according to our will. So God reveals this knowledge to us, and He makes us perform yoga so that our sins be wiped off. By yoga, I mean remembering God after considering ourselves to be this imperishable soul. So this is the core of God's teaching. Why does He teach now? Because after the end of Kali Yuga, it's going to be Satyug again. It's going to be the new world again. It's going to be heaven again. So there is a significance in this 5,000-year time cycle called Kalpa, which is whatever happens in one Kalpa, the same exact incidents keep repeating Kalpa after Kalpa. To understand it very easily, if you are listening to this video right now, it obviously means you listened to this video 5,000 years back on this very same day. And also you will be watching the same video in the upcoming Kalpa on the very same day. So this keeps repeating without any change. So that accurate is this world drama, and God reveals this drama. And also He says whoever were deities in the beginning, only they could understand this knowledge, and they would make effort to conquer these 5 vices and enter heaven. So if you are watching this video till now, it obviously means you were definitely deities. That is why you had this patience to listen this. So what happens in the sky in the form of eclipse is just the memorial of what happens here in the earth. So in the beginning, actually we can divide this Kalpa into 4 equal halves called Yug. So first is Satyug, Treta Yug, Dwapar Yug and Kali Yug. So Satyug and Treta Yug, they combinedly form heaven. Dwapar and Kali Yug, they combinedly form hell. So Satyug is the first class heaven, 100% heaven. And this one, Treta Yug, it can be called only 50% heaven because it gets old, right? So this fresh heaven, the inhabitants of the Satyug, the residents of Satyug, they were called Sun Dynasty. So here, since it becomes old, they couldn't experience as much happiness as they did while they were in Satyug. It is called Moon Dynasty because it decreases the happiness, peacefulness, blissfulness, wealth, everything decreases to a certain extent compared to that of Satyug. So that is why the residents of Treta Yuga, they are called Moon Dynasty. So what they mean by this solar eclipse is the Sun Dynasty souls, after taking several rebirths and entering Kali Yuga, they lose all the power, which means they are eclipsed. So that is what it means. They are eclipsed by Maya or Ravan. That is these five vices. It is called, these five vices are present both in men and women. They are combinedly called 10-headed Ravan. Other than that, there was no one with 10-headed throughout this kalpa. So it is just a corporeal representation of these subtle things that goes on within us, within our mind. So we are eclipsed by these five vices, and to get rid of that, there is only one way. We have to remember God as much as possible. The more you remember God, the more you get the power to conquer these vices. So here we have to give up these five vices, which is why during eclipse they have this habit of performing charity after solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. They give alms to beggars, they give dresses, food, so on. So that actually represents us giving this knowledge to unknowledgeable souls, so that they can even benefit, so that they can even enter heaven and enjoy the richness of heaven. And the reason people stay out of taking food and drink is we stay out of taking these five vices. So that is the kind of fast we carry out through this last birth. As a remembrance of that, they, at least during the eclipse time, these devotees, they don't take food or water. And recent people stay indoors and the temples are shut is because we, during this last 100 years called confluence age, we are asked by God to separate ourselves mentally from the residents of Kali Yuga. You know why? Because they drench themselves so much into these five vices. So if you get along with them very closely, there is a pretty good chance that you also get infected with these five vices. You got to save yourself. Only then you can connect yourself with God and fill yourself with those divine powers. After filling yourself with divine powers, you can distribute that mentally throughout this globe. That's how we serve the world. It is because we serve the world in the end by remembering God, we are remembered as deities by devotees. So if you want to be a good devotee, strictly observe what Bhakti Marg recommends you to do. But if you want to be a deity yourself, perform whatever God orders us to do, because God comes only once in this the entire 5,000 years, and He wouldn't come into heaven. So this is the only time we can understand everything about this world cycle, about the past, present and future through God. So once we enter heaven, we would have no idea of what we did to come into heaven. So this is the only time we are taught directly by God. We are so privileged. During eclipse time, they put a special type of grass called darpai over all edible items, so that it doesn't get affected by the negative energy that is emitted during the eclipse. What it actually represents is we don't eat or drink from outside, because it gets contaminated not only with the poisons that is used in fertilizers and insecticides, but also with negative vibrations. By negative vibrations, all I mean is these five vices, because people are just filled with these five vices all the time. So when they cook, they contaminate the food with these negative vices. So we need to stay out of that, even in its subtle form, because it will definitely have its impact. So that's why we have to protect ourselves from the food and drinks of Kali. Then where can we take food? So what we need to do is we have to cook on our own, and we have to cook it with the remembrance of God, so that we get filled with the divine powers, and also we put that divine power into whatever we cook, so that it gets rid of those negative vices. So in short, that eclipse time represents the last 100 years, where we follow only the directions of God, thereby getting the power from God and distributing that power through the atmosphere. So that is why temples are shut, because the deities inside the temple represent us, that we shut ourselves from the atmosphere of Kali Yuga. How do we do that? Through remembrance of God. It's not that we don't mingle with them. We do mingle with them, but we stay away from them mentally. So whenever we speak with anybody, our mind will stay connected to God. We will be conscious of the presence of God. Though we had to communicate or do anything externally, but our mind will stay firm with God, connected with God. So that is all God expects us to do. And what do we receive as a result? We receive the kingdom of heaven that's going to be filled with peace, bliss, wealth, health, whatever you want. Everything is there. Not only that, we humans will be filled with divine characters, which is why we were called deities in the first place. Not only humans, but also animals, they will be first class in their behavior. For example, lion and lamb, they take water at the same time from the same pond, which means even they don't have the habit of causing harm to one another. So that is why it is called heaven, and we are going to become the residents of heaven. So we have to change our character so divine as it matches with that of heaven. Only then we can enter heaven. So this is all for now. So if you like this video, don't forget to hit like button and leave your comments and subscribe. So let's see again in another interesting video. Till then, signing off by BK Saravana Kumar. Om Shanti. Thank you for listening to this long very patiently.